Welcome everybody to this Friday afternoon webinar from AACT. And today the topic is going to be preparing or making prop food. Our presenter today is Michael Wilson, who is the prop master at Grand Rapids Civic Theatre. He's also done work with Opera Grand Rapids, Circle Theater in Grand Rapids, and other local community theaters. He's a wizard at what he does. So assisting him today is Rhonda Lahan. She might be speaking to you to filter questions to him. So please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen to send in any questions that come up during the webinar. So Michael, we're thrilled to have you and Rhonda here today, and take it away.
Welcome to my prop shop here at Grand Rapids Civic Theatre in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I want to introduce you to a few people who are behind the scenes here today. I have Cody Colvin, who is our technical producer. Rhonda Leon, my stage manager. She'll be answering your questions on the chat. Matt Siegel, who's our cameraman, and our intern for the day, Ethan Goff. So without further ado, we can start with this. Today we're going to be talking about one of the things that I have found to be a very versatile thing for making prop food, and that is silicone clay. There are a few examples over here. Some of them are not. What we will be working with today, we're going to work on the tomato slice. You can see that on the sub sandwich that's here. The things that are within this that are the silicone clay are the tomato, the meat, and the cheese. So again, today we'll start, and we're just going to use the demonstration to show the tomato slice. The basic ingredients are just cornstarch and then silicone caulk. And to start with, get yourself down a piece of wax paper onto your work surface. It gets messy. I have worked with parchment paper, aluminum foil. I've found that the wax paper works the best for this. So the thing to remember about this clay is that it has a shelf life. It lasts about 15 minutes that you have to work with, a little bit more if you add some baby oil. When you get to, working with the silicone to add to it, you want to add what I found is the most workable amount of product to work with is a little bit on the small side, but it's just to work with something that's a little bit about the size of a golf ball, a little bit better than using a tongue depressor or something like that. Just start to work it in. The other thing is, you notice I've got the neoprene gloves on. You want to have those on for at least the first part here. At this stage, it is quite sticky, and that's why I work with the stick instead of that. Once you have it in there a little bit, then you can start working it together with your fingers. There's a consistency that the best thing I can do that you're trying to get to, and the best way I can explain it is it's a feel. You're trying to get this to be somewhere close to, like, not the feel of Play-Doh, the feel of silly putty. And it's hard to describe, but I've got to say, anybody who I've ever had work with me with this stuff, and I've explained it to them, that when their clay hits that spot, it's like a light goes on and say, oh, I feel it. So that's what you're looking for. So just keep working it into the cornstarch as you go here, and you can go from that. One of the other things that you can do, it will extend the life a little bit. I think it's a bit debatable, but it does change the consistency, and that is you can add a couple of drops of baby oil to it. I'm not going to today. I really don't need to. But one of the things that will do, that will change, is it will make the clay feel just a little bit smoother, especially when you're rolling it out or that kind of stuff. So you need to kind of figure out the texture that you need to work with. But just keep working with it. By the time it's getting to this stuff, now you can either paint this, you can leave it raw like this color and then paint your object, or like I prefer on some of these things, so that you get more of a thorough color all the way through that looks more like food, is to add the paint, at least the base coat of the paint. Suddenly it's getting sticky on me. I need to add some more in here. You can see how it's starting to stick to my gloves. That's not a good sign. So you work it up a little bit. As you add the paint, that is also going to change the consistency, and you're going to have to add some more. Make sure, because of this work time that you have here, that you have the your paint color, base color mixed up before. The other thing that I have found every time I'm working with food props is straight color doesn't work. You really need to have a mix. It's just one of those things about nature. Nature doesn't like perfection very well. It prefers to have things that are just a little bit off. So this paint here that I mixed up is a combination of an orange, a true red, and a bit of yellow. And the other part of that to work with is really another one of your better friends whenever you're working with this thing is your computer and your printer. Have a good printer that you can print objects from, but go and look at images in your search and then print it out so that you have something to reference. To add the color to it, I just start scooping it out, and here's where you start to get really messy and work it in. I do have the paint color mixed fairly close to what I want it to be, because you would think that having all of this white clay would change the color, but it really doesn't too much. It doesn't lighten it up much at all. Again, as soon as I have added this clay, or the paint to the clay, it has gotten sticky, so I'm working more of the
Michael, could you let them know what color paints you used in that mix?
I sure can, thank you. This one it's Anita's acrylic, and it was true red. And this is another Anita's acrylic, and this was just their regular orange. I used most of that, of the two of them, and it still wasn't quite to the pinky orange that I wanted it to be. So then I added a yellow, and this is just their straight yellow. That's something that's in my shop all the time. Is I have a rainbow of acrylic paint. I really believe you cannot have too much of that. So now I'm finally getting here to where I can start to feel that difference. Don't worry about the color, having the powder on here. You need to have that there because it will stick to things more than you want it to. So I'm going to leave this here, spread it out a little bit so I can roll it and get this stuff moving into a ball. I have a specific depth, a thickness. It's just what I want to eyeball. But when I'm rolling, you can either just roll it out and, use your eye and figure it out. But when I'm trying to be consistent, I tend to use a couple of sticks or something like that to give me a consistent. Now you can see I don't quite, here's a very good example. I don't have it mixed up enough. You can see the white streaks in there. I want that to go away a little bit. So I'm going to mix this. You got to really work it through. That will help to leave that out. Sometimes that variation in color, depending on the food that you're trying to do, can be beneficial. Other times, not so much. So now that I have that out to the thickness that I have, and basically I just use a little piece of scrap wood around here. Now, where did I put my... There it is, my X-Acto. I like to cut it out with an X-Acto knife, anything sharp, regular knife. Again, remember, a tomato is round, but it's not perfectly round. So you don't want to take like a cup or a glass or something to give it out, because again, that little bit of too much perfect makes it look not natural. So I'm just cutting out the size that I want. Tomatoes do not grow perfectly circled. Even the grocery store ones don't do that. And work it from there. I'm just going to set this aside, and we will let that be a waste today. Now, the next thing to do is to remember tomatoes have, in a slice, you've got a hardcore center of the flesh, you have the outside rim, but then there's these cavities where there's this gelatin material and the seeds are. So you need to kind of cut those in. And again, I just kind of eyeball them. Depending on the variety of tomato that you might be working with, they can all be in kind of on the outside edge. Some of them actually have them throughout. So you got to kind of decide which one you're trying to imitate and go for it. I like to just keep it simple and work with it from the outside and not complicate it too much. So I'm just cutting it out and leaving it in there. And these cavities can be anything from 4 or 5, depending on how big you made your slice. I try to have a little bit of the flesh move back up into that cavity because that's kind of how everything in the tomato works. Again, the reason you want to have those photos all the time they're a great reference. Don't have them very far away from you. You'll be back at them all the time. Referencing that makes all the difference in the world. At this point, you would want to set this aside and let it harden up more. I have tried to use it before when it's really soft and to go on to the next step, but it works better to let it set up. So, but for what we need to do today, I need this to go away. We don't have the 15 or 20 minutes to wait for that to happen before we go to the next step. So I'm going to discard this. Get rid of the gloves finally. They're saviors on your hands, but on the same token, I prefer to work with my hands all the time. You're going to want to have some more wax paper down. And again, wax paper is what I find works best at this point. Now, we have one that is all set up. You can see how much firmer it is. It's still flexible, but it's very workable. Now, we have our cavities here, and we need to get the gelatin mix to go inside it. And the magic ingredient on that is epoxy glue. The brands vary somewhat depending, and some are they tend to grow to cure clear, but you've got to mix them up. And depending on which of epoxy you're using, you don't have a whole lot of time here. Most of them can be anything from 5 minutes, 10 minutes or less. And that's not going to stop. And because it's clear and that gelatin in a tomato is a little bit yellow, so I've just got alcohol dye. It's so versatile. Regular dye will not work in this epoxy stuff, and I'm just doing 1 drop is all you really need, but it makes a difference in that color. You might say, well, why are you going to that difference? You're on the stage. What's the difference? You know, you've got the 50-foot rule or whatever it is. But believe me, the thing that makes fake food work on stage is the more detail you put it. Our eyes are really, really good at picking things up. We may not recognize what is wrong, but if something's a little bit off, our eyes know it, and you're going to feel it. So you can see now I've got this up there. I've got a nice little yellow. You can use your craft stick. If smaller pieces, I use toothpicks all the time. I've got toothpicks around on my work table at all times, but just kind of scoop it out and drizzle it in.
Michael, what color paint alcohol dye did you use for this, please?
That was a golden yellow. I've tried it with orange too, but in the alcohol ink, the orange gets a little bit too orange, even in a small quantity. It's just, so I kind of rely on the fact that having this yellow in the red makes it a little bit to the orange side. I'm not going to take it anymore, but normally you would fill all of those up and then go on. And then while it is still setting up, your next step is you have to add the seeds. The thing that works the best I have found for the seeds is I just have red pepper seed from flaked red pepper. Use a tweezers to get them out and just kind of place them in there. You got to kind of poke them down in a little bit.
Michael, do you think that when you're working with these types of materials that you should be wearing a mask or respirator to use it?
It's going to depend. For the clay, no. Unless you're really, really sensitive to odors, I don't think you're going to have an issue. Some epoxy glues out there can be quite strong, and you might want to then. The Gorilla Glue one that I tend to use is my favorite. I don't find that happen.
What brand of alcohol dye do you like to use?
What is this one? I'm not sure what the brand is on this. I got it from the candle making section of Hobby Lobby. So that's your step there. Then again, now you let this go and set it aside to let that that epoxy harden up. The thing to remember about epoxy is it does stick to everything, even wax paper if you let it too long. So I find that if you let it sit there for about 6 to 8 hours, it's still a little bit flexible, and then you can pick it up and you can easily and carefully peel it off of the wax paper, and you don't have to do it. If you should happen to go a little bit too long with it, and that happened with a couple of mine that I was doing here, pull it off. You're going to have wax paper stick to it, but it's set up enough now. A little bit of warm water running at the kitchen tap or whatever, and your fingers, and you can just kind of work it, gently massage it, and it'll work off, and you'll get that out of your way with no problem. So now, the next thing that you have to do here, and I need a little bit of wax paper here. Now you have some other detail stuff that you can do. At this point, everything is hardened up enough, and you're going to find you've got some of this, the white residue on it and that kind of stuff. Just a dry paintbrush, a lot of it will come off. If a lot of it is still sticking there, again, just that warm water wash and moving it around with your fingers will make it go away. Take a paper towel, pat it dry, and then you're ready for your next step, which now moves us to getting some of the detail stuff in. In a tomato, you can always see there's always the whitish yellow pieces that move out of the core and go to the side. And there's also little dot things. So here again, what do I got? I have this is buttercream, and this one is a sunshine yellow. It tends to be more yellow than it is to white, but again, I've not found a good color that is straight and right to it. So I mix. I work off of cheap paper plates or ripped up pieces of wax paper all the time. They're easy to throw away, and I don't worry about it. I usually also have a glass of water and a paper towel around for my paintbrush, and I mix right there, just like you would on a regular palette. Again, now just on a light touch and really random. Here's where if you have a shaky hand, it's a good thing. Again, if the straight lines don't work. And so I'm just kind of adding it in. This is a little bit heavy, but it's better to get a little bit heavy into it. And then you can always take a little bit of your paper towel and pat it and listen it up. And that'll also soften your edges a little bit. Straight edges, especially really straight and hard edges, don't exist in nature. We have lines, but they're not straight. And our eye recognizes straight really easily. Okay, the other thing that tomatoes have is there's little dots of this white color out there. End of your brush works really good for that. And they're very random. They tend to be out towards the rim. And also of varying intensity. So if you want a lot, make that your first one and return to your paint palette a lot. But other than that, so now it's these little detail things which really start to make the food look real. It feels like you're making props for the actor, not for the stage and the audience, but these details do make a difference. And some of that is just me. The more detail I can put into things, the better I like it. So that is that. Then you set that aside and let that paint dry. Once you've gotten to that point, now a sliced tomato looks wet. And to make it wet, I found that the best thing to use is just polyurethane. You can use, easy is the water-based polyurethane in gloss. Gloss looks wet. Matte won't look wet. Even semi-gloss won't look wet. But glossy will. I've used both the water base, which I love because it's so easy to clean up. But I have found with the water base that you have to do multiple layers of it to get that really good glossy wet look. So this one was done, and this used regular polyurethane, which you have to use mineral water or something like that to clean up. But that was one coat. This one was done with the polyurethane that was water-based, and I have 4 coats on it. Another benefit of the water base is that it dries much, much faster. So you can do multiple coats relatively quickly. I think it takes about 10, 15 minutes in between coats, where the regular polyurethane, even the fast drying of the regular, it's going to take you easily 45 minutes to an hour before it's not tacky to the touch. So that's kind of the process of what I do to work with the silicone clay. Like I said, I have found that it is so versatile. I can use so many different things. When we were making the sub sandwiches for Junie B Jones, it was like, well, what am I going to be doing here? I have to have meat. I have to have the tomato and the cheese. So we worked it out. The cheese is just the silicone base. It's just the silicone base, colored again all the way through with the clay. I think that was an orange and a yellow that was used in that, and rolled out. I then cut it in triangles, and I let it dry, just hanging over a bunch of old closet dowels that were cut. And that gave me that nice curve that you can see. So it looks like it falls down over it. The meat, we just rolled it out really thin, picked it up like it was a big flat spaghetti. Here's some better examples of just the pieces that are in it. And we just kind of folded it down we sat it down on the surfaces and just kind of let it wander through and give us all this different dimension. And I wanted to have various different things. So I did turkey, and we colored it for ham. and some of it was a little bit light, and so I've got a couple different kinds of ham there. Again, the cheese, set it aside. This stuff, especially like the meat where you roll it out really thin, you're going to have lots of the cornstarch on it. Let it dry, and the brush just makes it go away, and then it's fine. Other parts of the sub sandwich were the bun. We'll get to that in a minute. The lettuce. Lettuce has been a bit of an issue for me. I have yet to find anything that works better than just silk plant lettuce. You can get nice heads of it, and I like to use multiple colors because it gives you more variation in it. This is what I've used for it. I snip these off. I cut out, there's a metal piece that runs down through here. I cut that out and go into half pieces of it are so much easier to work with. Now, the process of doing the bun is a bit of a process. We started out with just using an electric knife and upholstery foam and cutting our rectangle. This is enough for 2 half subs right here. Then, using the electric knife, I trimmed it down to a rough shape of the sub bun. Then it's too hard to get easy, soft, round curves with the electric knife. So something that became my best friend in this was my belt sander with a rather coarse grade of sandpaper on it. Fired it up, and I just kept it moving all the time and roll it around and smooth everything all off. At that point, I'd have it all the way done, take the electric knife, cut it in half. Now you've got something that looks like this. Make a slit with the electric knife to open it up, but don't cut it all the way through. And then here's where my toothpicks came back into play. I use them to hold it open, because the other thing that I have found in bread, I have worked with many different things for bread. I've used regular styrofoam. It kind of has the texture of bread, but not quite. And it is so rigid, it's difficult to work with. I wanted that softer feel, but I wanted the texture of styrofoam. And that's what I found that upholstery foam has worked out well. And then by sanding it, you kind of get that wonderful texture that bread crust has. But then the other thing is you can, in the past, I've tried spray paint. It kind of looks like it, but not quite. I dislike using acrylic paints on foam because it sucks it up and it takes forever for it to dry. Sometimes it never really dries. And so what works for me is carpenter's glue, wood glue. And again, 2 different things. What I've found, it gives you a couple of easier to follow things. Here you see, this one was done with the Elmer's. It's much more yellow. And this one was done with the Gorilla Glue wood glue. It's a softer yellow. I like this as the base better. It's my personal preference, but some breads do demand it to be more of a yellow base to it. The nice thing about this is now you've got a great base coat paint without even having to apply paint to it. But we painted the entire bun. The entire bun was painted with the wood glue, and we sat it aside and let it dry. This time, yep, it takes some patience. It takes a couple of days for it to dry out really, really decently. Once it's dry, now it's rigid, and you can take your toothpicks out and it stays open. If you need it to open up a little bit more as you do it, you can carefully pull it open, but be careful, it will rip all the way through.
Michael, when you cut the foam to make those sub buns, what type of blade did you use to cut the foam with?
Just the regular scalloped blade of a electric knife. The thing to remember with electric knives and foam is that it dulls them down really fast. So as you're cutting, stop frequently, like you do 3 or 4 cuts and stop. Wipe the blade. Get rid of that powdery residue that comes from it, and that will make your blades last longer. You can sharpen them, but you can also get extra blades. I have extra blades for my electric knives all the time. I tend to keep 3 electric knives in the shop here all the time because I use them if you get online, there are some electric knives now that have really skinny blades. They're very versatile for some things. So that was the process from there. After that, now you can see from going from this to it, now it's really easy because you've got this hard covering to it. The foam isn't going to soak up the paint. So now you can go to your acrylic paint and you can just add whatever you need to. Here we've added some white. There's 3 different colors of brown were added to this. The more, to get your texture with paint, work with multiple colors rather than a single color. You get that variation and it goes down. Very little of this from here on was done with a brush. It was all done with a sponge or paper towel and dab and touch, and it gives you a nice texture. Once I wanted to have a couple of marks like it had been sitting on a grill, and that was done with a brush. Here I can show you, working with food props, there are always failures. And you have to be prepared for failures, and you have to be prepared to throw things away. But you don't learn anything with it. And I have always wanted to say, oh, there's got to be a way to make lettuce that works. And I have, like I said, I have yet. But I tried it with the silicone. This is as close as I got, and I'm not happy with it in any way. You can see why I want to move towards just the Silicone at this point. It's easier. Why create something you don't have to? Outside of the fact that I'm always trying to figure out how to make something differently than it really is. That's just the nature of who I am. So, but I kept that on purpose so that I could show you that, yeah, there are many things that you come up against and they move on from there. The other thing that was really easy that are in subs are onions. And so I racked my brain for the longest time, and I tried to do the silicone clay with that too, but it's so hard to work with to have it strips that small. And then I'm walking through the hardware store one day and I saw zip strips, and it's like the light bulb went off and it's like, oh, I have onions. And these are, what are these? These are 8-inch standard white cable ties or zip strips. And to keep them in size, I just run them in just till they barely click. I take my nippers, nip it off, and this is what you have. And then when you go and you put them in, bury them in, you can take the lock part, I bury it inside, you'll never see it. And layer them in. Because they are white, don't put them white on white. You'll never see it. So we added a little bit here and there. As I put all of this stuff together, originally I had thought that with this sub sandwich, I could just put the stuff in there and it would be there. It doesn't stay. And as you know, with any prop, you always need to actor-proof it. So a little hot glue, a little of the Eileen's tacky glue also works. I just like the immediacy that hot glue does with it. It's a pain in the butt because you have to clean up all the little spidery webs afterwards, but it gets the job done fast. And so then I just started to construct the sandwiches. I added the lettuce to the bottom and the cheese. Then where did I go from there? From that point, I glued the tomato to the top part of the bun, and I'm just working back and forth. I got my onions into it, tacked them just at the back, and then the meat went onto it from there. But what I found was I had this space here that was hard to fill up with anything, and it didn't look quite right. So I just tucked a little bit more lettuce in there, and that's where we went with that. Do we have any more questions, Rhonda, on the subs or the clay, or should we move on to some of the others?
Great job of answering everyone's questions. We're very impressed with your attention to detail. If you'd like to move on to some of the others,
Yep.
I think that'd be great to give them an idea of what else. I do have one question that just popped up.
Yep.
What paint combo did you use for the ham and turkey?
For the ham and turkey, it's been a while since I did that. I've got to think back. The ham was a rosy pink. I do not know the name of it, but then it was too pink, and I actually added kind of a very light creamy brown color to it in small amounts, and I just kept comparing as I mixed and played. The turkey was basically just a cream with just a tiny touch of yellow to it. Sometimes when I say a tiny touch, it is literally in the amount of paint that I'm using. I am dipping into the paint with the toothpick and I'm adding a couple drops. It's a process of very small incremental steps. Another question.
Can you let people know how you store these items? Does it last long in storage, or is this a one-time deal that's thrown away when we're done?
It depends. The items themselves, or like the paint that we're building with. I'm confused on the question a little bit. The prop itself. Okay, that is one thing. I noticed because I was building these things just prior to COVID, and we had a bunch of this stuff in here, but the subs weren't all completed yet. We had the meat done, and to get it cleared off the table before I left the shop when we were moved out of the theater, I just piled it all up on a plate and set it aside. And what happened is, I don't know if you can see with the camera, you see the color, the discoloration here? It got much more yellow. And that was from them being stacked on top of each other. And I think that's because they weren't completely cured when we got sent home to lockdown. And that happened. So in the future, I think I would store separately and not piled on top of each other, just to stop that out. I use plastic tins a lot, of whatever size or anything like that. They work really nice. They're very stackable. I try to keep them the clear ones so that I can see into it. It's just easier to see into these bins than it is to have to read labels. But if I have something that's really big and it's got to go into one of the colored bins, then I label everything before it goes on the shelves. I expect this silicone stuff to last a long time. I don't, as long as it's been cared for and kept out of the dust, I don't think it's an issue of time frames. I don't think I would leave it sitting in bright light all the time. I think it would become like fabric, and you would see some color change in that. So that's, yeah, shelves and plastic bins are my favorite way of storing things. Okay, now here's another item here as we come. We're going to kind of move the camera over, but I'm going to kind of stay here and talk a little bit. You'll see these are cookies. They're again done with the silicone clay. Same basic recipe, just done in different ways. There's 3 of them here. We have a sugar cookie, a peanut butter cookie, and a ginger snap. All three of these were made with the material and not added paint to it. And I just let them dry. Yep, I got one here. And this is what it looks like when it's done. I would put them into a ball. I'm working on top of the cornstarch here for it. But then to get that texture of pushing down, you know, sometimes if you want something like a cookie that you did use a glass on if you were doing real cookies, use a glass to press it down. I wanted the sugar cookies, I wanted that rougher texture. And so I just crumpled up some tin foil, and that once I had it pressed down, I just pressed into it, and that set the texture. If I were to do something more specifically for the ginger snaps, I would be more aggressive with the depth of the crumpled tin foil so that you got deeper cracks into it, because gingerbread tends to have deeper cracks in it. But here I just wanted to show the difference. So these three are just painted in with colors to get it to look like they have been baked. The sugar cookie and the ginger snap, which usually has a sugar coating to them, that's just large iridescent or clear glitter that I sprinkled on it, brushed a little. If you do it when you are doing the paint, you can sprinkle right into the wet paint and it will stick. If you've painted it and it's dried and then you think, oh, I want some sugar, that sugar look on it, then just a little bit of like Elmer's clear glue, not the glue that dries clear, the clear glue, and paint it on with a little bit light coat with your paintbrush, and then sprinkle your glitter, and you'll never know that you even have the glue on it. The chocolate chip one this was just an experiment. Next time, if I were going to do, I wanted a plate of the chocolate chip, I would make them much thicker, more like the sugar cookie. And the chips are just brown wooden beads. You can see a difference in the two ways that I did it here. These right out in front here, I literally put the beads into the clay before I compressed it. Also, this is one where I colored the clay. I pressed it down. It tended to completely cover the bead, but I just took my finger and took that thin coat off and wiped it out, and you get that nice look of chocolate chips that still have a little bit of batter over the top of them. But for the stage, I wanted to have a bolder look, so then I just stuck some of the others in. This is where I think having a bit of a thicker cookie than something that is so thin is I would have been able to get those beads pushed down into the clay a little bit better, and I think they would have looked more natural. We've got a glass of milk here. This is my liquids on stage are also always another big issue. We try not to ever have liquid if we don't have to, but you have things on your tables and those kind of things that should have liquid in them. And so here's where a floral product comes in very handy. This one is Panacea. It's a 2-part mix that you mix together, and it sets up, and it's much more of a firm jelly consistency. It works really good for champagne and wine and those kind of things. You can color it. Do not use grocery store food coloring. For some reason, when you put that into this stuff, it never hardens. I have had some sit there for 6 months and it's never done. Something happens in the chemical reaction. But the dyes that they use for frosting, like you can get from Hobby Lobby or a cake store, those will work in there. And as long as you don't have to go too much dye into it, it'll harden. What I have found since then is the alcohol dyes work the best. The problem with alcohol dyes and this kind of stuff is it's tiny little amounts to get to the thing the color that you want. Alcohol dyes are really intense, and also they tend to be more primary and secondary in their colors, and not much different from there on. Another one that I recently discovered was this one here, this craft water. This is a single unit. It's a little bit weird in how you use it. You take the bottle and you put it in boiling water in the bottle. Don't open the bottle. If you've opened the bottle or the bottle comes open, you have a horrible mess. And then you will throw the pan away. But it turns this jelly to liquid, and you can pour it in. It responds really, really well to both the cake dye and to the alcohol dye. The thing about this one is it has the consistency, and it dries to like the feel of Jell-O. It's always a little bit. When you store anything made out of this stuff, you want to make sure it's covered because it attracts dust like nobody's business. A neat thing about this one here is you can reheat that and remelt it. You'll never get the color back out of it, but it is reusable in some things. As you look at some of the other liquids that I've got over here, we've got a rosé and a champagne. They're of the two component pieces, and just a little bit of color added to them. The beer, which is on the very far end down there, that is also the two-part mix. How I got the bubbles into it was as it sat up, as it was beginning to firm up, I would take a stir stick and I stirred and stirred and stirred and stirred, and it would put the bubbles in it. And then I would walk away for a little while and let it set. And the bubbles would start to come back out again. So then, but before it would be totally set up, I'd stir it up again. I think that I did that process about 3 times. The thing I haven't figured out with that one yet, but we'll get around to it at some point here, is beer should have more of a foam top to it. And when I did the last stir, I had a nice like 1/4 inch layer of that white foam on the top. But as it finished curing, that disappeared. The bubbles came out of it, and I just had what I have there. So I have yet to figure out how to make foam on things, but we're getting closer. Yes?
Michael, we had a great question. Someone asked, what's your favorite fail that has led you to success?
In the food?
Yeah.
Trying to carve a turkey out of foam. I struggled with it for a long, long time, and figured out I tried to do it as a whole bird, and it just didn't work. And that's back when, okay, they asked what my favorite fail in food props was that led me to success. And I was saying, I think it was in carving a turkey. It didn't have the right feel. I was trying to do the entire bird all out of one piece. It didn't work. And I was at that point, I hadn't learned about making coats, like using the glue and stuff on the foam to give it that harder coat. So I'm trying to paint just carved foam. I didn't know enough about sanding it down yet. It's that trying to do that project with that bird, and I probably threw 3 of them away, and I still was never ever happy with what I had. But I learned all kinds of the different techniques of using a sander, using glue and those kind of things as that heavy coat. That made all the difference. Here you see we have another example of this shows a little bit more presentation. You have a realistic food prop, but then go that other step and present it right. Use the delicatessen paper. Use the basket that it would come in. They're easy to find, but all of those little details. If you're doing a plate of food, the food doesn't just lay there. You know, you have utensils. They're there. The lobster, there's going to be scraps of lobster. There's going to be scraps of lobster that are there, and pieces. Here, a little bit. Again, the butter. The butter is just, again, it's the colored epoxy glue. I let it set up, and then the lobster flakes, the pieces of flesh, that's just pieces. I just took I took my X-Acto knife on that one. I tried using a vegetable peeler, but it gave me, I didn't like the texture. But just using my X-Acto knife, I just got chipped off little pieces of the white wax and dribbled it on top, and you've got lobster in there. The lemon is actually, I had some artificial lemons. I cut them. They were whole plants. I cut them into the slices, got rid of the foam that was inside, and I had a nice texture. And by curving it up and working with it, it looks like squeezed lemon.
Michael, could you repeat the question after I asked it?
Okay.
What type of foam do you find best for carving? The example they were interested in is the French fries.
The French fry, this is upholstery foam again. What foam do I like to use for it? And upholstery foam, sometimes I will grab like pillow forms. Other times I will buy it by the sheet. I find it very versatile because I can use it as, I can get it in thin sections, I can get it thicker ones, whatever I need, and it carves really nicely while you're using the electric knife. These were actually, we just cut them down out of the upholstery foam. These actually, I use my small tabletop bandsaw to cut them down once we had them down there. And another one of those things, stop and wipe your blade down a lot. Other thing, both sanding this stuff and cutting it like on a bandsaw, have your shop vac around because you have dust, styrofoam dust going everywhere, and you will want to wear a mask at that point. Next to this, you'll also see I've got some peaches here. These were also done with the silicone clay, both coloring the clay and then a little bit of detail to it. The sauce is, once again, just the colored epoxy. I use epoxy for sauces and gravies a lot. I do find that it is better to use that epoxy for things that are kind of clear or colored clear, to try to make it like a gravy, like a beef gravy or something like that. You have to put too much acrylic paint or something like that into it, and it doesn't harden right. This one was I just did them as slices too, just to prove that I could.
Hey, Michael, that fear that you have, someone has asked, how do you stir that up to get the bubbles in without making a huge mess in the glass?
Carefully.
And could you repeat the question?
Yes. The question was to ask how I got the bubbles into that without making a huge mess on the glass. And I use bamboo skewers because they're really long and slender, and I like them as a stir stick. But you do have to remember, when you are stirring, don't drag it across the edge where you don't want any of that stuff to cling to, because it will. And it's really hard to clean off from there. So there's a lot of it is just being careful.
The glasses that you're using, are you using plastic, the glasses on the plates, plastic or real glass? And do you have a good source for getting those items? Please repeat the question.
Question was, on the glasses that I use, are they glass or are they plastic? Same question with the plates, and a preference with it. Where I can, I always do try to find something that is not glass for on stage. Plates I have found to be a bit of an issue because with plastic plates, you don't get the depth. And I have tried to put them, glue numbers of them together to get that thickness. You just don't get the look. So I try to find the heaviest thing that I can. I don't like putting china on, but I will, because it's really hard to imitate china. But Restaurant quality plates, I find to be the best thing. It takes quite a little effort to throw these and break them. And so you go from there. Glasses, again, I will try to do with it. These two here and the lemonade, those are all plastic. Find it with texture, find it with good grace. These actually I find at the dollar store, and they come in a bag, 2 of them for $1. They have a nice look to them. What happens though is they're tipsy with this weight up here. So if you have people carrying them, you have to go to a trick that I've used where I take a little washer and I glue it in right here. And then I make sure that the tray is a tray where I can then glue small flat magnets to it. And when they sit, they stay there. And they're not that heavy that if your actors take it and if they tip it, it'll come off. Another trick is you can, if it's only a little bit of movement, you can take your tray and put like the thin, not the thick foam double stick tape, but the thin double stick tape, like for carpet. Put that down on your tray. You will find you'll need to unsticky it just a little bit, just pat it and make it a little unsticky. Then the glasses will tack to it enough, but when your actors, they need to be taught tip and pick, and they'll come off.
Michael, one more question. Someone wants to know, you've made cookies before, but have you made donuts? Repeat the question, please.
Oh, I made cookies, but have I made donuts? Yes, I have made donuts. I had a huge display for when we did Calendar Girls, and at that point I did them, and I wasn't using the silicone clay at that point. I actually used a paper mache base product, and then took the shredded insulation, the shredded paper insulation that you can get at the building supply store, and I just would take that out and I'd mix it up with the glue base for that, and I would form it and slowly dry it in my oven. It took a while, but they made nice texture. They had a little bit of weight to them, and with them, it was all it was all in the painting and the little details that you put on that made them look real.
You only have 3 minutes left, but maybe could you quickly go over just a couple of the fun elements that you use to create these desserts, like the frosting and what those cakes are actually made of?
Okay.
Repeat the question.
Yep. Just to talk about some of the different things that are here on these desserts, the different elements of it and what they are. We'll go over here first. This is wax. Then I have some fake blueberries, which I just ordered online. These little trays here that I did them. These were done in an ice cube. The round ones were done in a round ice cube mold and poured in. With wax, you have to remember it settles and you'll get a concave thing to it. These I didn't have to worry about it too much because I knew I was putting them in the little crystals, and so that faces down. If you need it to be perfectly round, you'll need to do a second pour in it. Wax is easy to color with your different, either with your alcohol ones or even with the little dye chips that come with the candle making stuff. But wax gives you a really nice, that almost translucent look to it. The whipped cream that you see on here is spackling that we've run through a decorator's tube with that. Regular like plaster stucco that is too thick. What I have found is that the tubs of the super whipped quick dry stuff, that works the best. And you can color that also. So it works from there. We get down to these here. Again, it's just a cherry that I ordered online. The whipped cream, again, is a spackle. This part is foam. And the sauce is more of a colored epoxy. You get down to the bottom here, it's foam. Here we have, this is actually quilter's batting. that we put onto it. And then just, I also tend to have all kinds of Christmas, the Christmas picks and that kind of stuff. Every year I clear out a whole bunch of that stuff and put it aside. It has so many different things. They're berries. They just look so good. Yep. Okay. So we've covered a lot today. I really appreciate you guys all spending the time with us here, and that I can show a few things off and show you a few of my techniques. I really appreciate it, and I really, really appreciate the help of my crew here. Thank you so much.
We can't hear you, Quiana.
Oopsie daisy, sorry about that. So once again, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Rhonda, for agreeing to do this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you are not a member of AACT, we highly encourage you to, so that we can continue to provide programming like this. For those that have some follow-up questions about what they saw today, we will be sending out an email, and Michael has agreed to share his email, so you can email him with any questions, follow-up questions that you may have. And
I can interrupt and say that his email address for all of you listening is michaelwilsonprops@gmail.com.
Easy peasy. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And once again, thank you for joining us. Have a great day. Bye-bye.